Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live right here on Ubuntu channel, and this is meeting your leaders. I'll actually throw it to Lance to take over and introduce the guests tonight.
Thank you so much, Chaz. Good evening to you, and definitely good evening, and welcome to tonight's broadcast of Meet Your Leaders on Ubuntu channel, Zambia. Of course, we are glad that you could find time and join us today. And of course, I am your host, Lance Sanibanda, and on the program this evening, me and Chaza play host to local government and rural development permanent secretary for administration, Mr. Maambo Haamaundu. Now, of course, today on the program, our topic of discussion is bordering on Constituency Development Fund. Like I said, our guest this particular evening is a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Local Government and, of course, rural development. This is Mr. Maambo Haamaundu, PS Administration. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the program and good to have you.
Good evening, Lance. Good evening, Chazi, and good evening to the rest of the people who are watching us. It's good to be on the program.
Wow, we are so delighted that you are part of the program this particular evening, and we hope to have an intriguing 55 minutes of sharing wisdom and, of course, making a layman or the general populace of Zambia to understand what CDF is, the procedures that they can follow, and, of course, how one can take part in participating in the community constituency development fund. Of course, not taking too much of the time, maybe we can first begin with you taking us through the core function of the ministry first. Of course, people have.
Well, I think as the name itself depicts, we are the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, and amongst the core functions that we have is we oversee all the 116 local authorities across the country. We are in charge of markets. We are in charge of graveyards. We are in charge of feeder roads. We are also in charge of chiefs and traditional affairs. We are in charge of feeder roads. So we are an encompassing ministry, so to say. We are a ministry which is probably one of the most human-centric ministries in Zambia. So our scope is really, really wide in a manner of speaking. So, and added to the things that I've said, suffice to say that the topic that you have picked on today is sitting in our ministry. So we are also in charge of the Constituency Development Fund. So in essence, that is what our ministry is all about.
All right. Thank you so much for that, and of course for sharing what the ministry is all about. Over to you, Chaza, with the first question in the CDF.
Thank you so much, Lance. Would like to find out at this point what could have been the spirit behind the legislation of the CDF Act number 11 of 2018.
Well, look, as the name itself entails or suggests, CDF are acronyms which stand for Constituency Development Fund. So therein lies where or what the main thrust of this fund is. It is to develop a constituency. And when we're looking at developing a constituency, it is not just about developing the infrastructure, because many a times people have this conception to say you just need to develop a constituency, put in place infrastructure such as schools, feeder roads, hospitals, mother shelters, police posts, maize sheds, you name it. But beyond that, in terms of thrust and direction now, because what I've mentioned is probably what was being considered as the traditional role of CDF was just to develop members of the constituency. But as we are sitting now, what you must appreciate is that the scope of the CDF has been expanded, whereas in the past years, the maximum amount that was being received per constituency was 1.6 million. In 2022, this was varied upwards by over 1,600%, and we are now sitting on 25.7 million. And in there, we are now saying that in terms of scope, another component has been added into there, which is the bursaries and skills development. That is to develop skills and to develop the minds of the people, because there has been realization to say that without developing the minds of the people, you can seldomly talk about development, because when the mind is developed, you have a great asset, you've got a great tool that can be used to advance the developmental agenda of the country. So a component of skills development and boarding fees has been added on, because we are now saying development of the country must be anchored by human beings. It must be anchored by you and me. It must be anchored by the people who are listening to us out there. And how can we anchor development if we don't have a firm understanding? Government is now saying we need to invest in education. So other than the aspect of free education for people who are going into day schools, government says let us extend this to those who are going into boarding schools and are unable to pay boarding fees. The idea is let us have as many people as possible being exposed to education so that the minds are nourished, the minds become rich and are able to analyze, are able to ask critical questions. And once we reach that level, we must be able to define the developmental agenda of the country. Of course, the question can be asked to say, but education is a process. Yes, it is a process. Even development is a process. So from the education component, we are now saying that we are investing in the future. Remember, there are people who are in grade 8 now, there are people in grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. They are being imparted on knowledge, some of which could be used 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The critical thing is we are developing a cadre of people who are literate, who would be able to analyze and argue things because they are educated. We don't want to leave people behind because they are not educated. Beyond that, we're also looking at aspects of infrastructure development. Many a times, people tend to have to complain to say our ideas are not being taken on course. Government is making decisions that are not priority for people in Kaputa, or for people in Chienge, or for people in Mongu, for people in Lusaka, for people in the country. But now government has said, we realize that as a people, you must have a bigger stake. So for government, we'll play a facilitative role. We will make available in the year 2022, 25.7 million per constituency, which translates to over 4 billion for the whole country. This money government is saying, you the people out there, you Lance and Himba and the rest of you can participate in deciding the developmental agenda for the area that you reside in. The way CDF is being administered now is that from the constituency point of view, we have what is known as ward development committees. And beneath the ward development committees, and by the way, we have 1,858 wards across this country. So government has now directed to say you need to put in place zones within these wards. I'll pick on an example of Kabwata constituency. Kabwata constituency has got 4 or 5 wards, if I'm not mistaken. There's Chilenje ward, there's Kabwata ward, there's Livala ward, there's Kamlanga. And for Livala ward, it has been divided into 11 zones. The whole idea is to ensure that as many people as possible participate in determining the developmental agenda of Livala ward. So what has been happening is that members of the ward development committees have been calling for meetings in which ideas on what the residents need to be done within their localities were being requested for. People were asked to participate. What do you want to see in terms of development within your ward? They put forth those suggestions, and the procedure is such that once they get these submissions, the members of the ward development committee will then pass on this information to the Constituency Development Committee. They will make a recommendation to say, these are the desires of the people of Livala ward. Of course, as members of the ward development committees, they've been given a peculiar role of offering leadership. So their role is, after picking information from all these 11 zones, they must come up with a summary and identify what the priority areas are, and they pass on this information to the Constituency Development Committee, who of course also have got a responsibility to look at the submissions that have come from all the wards and make a recommendation or pass on a recommendation to the ministry for approval. As you might appreciate, the CDF Act, which you referred to, of 2018, has vested authority in the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development when it comes to approval. So once you go through all the processes, they end up at the Minister of Local Government for the minister's approval. After the approval, what then happens next is the approvals go back to the local authorities, who are the secretariat, for procurement, if there's procurement that needs to be done, or administration, so that the resources begin to be utilized. So in essence, that is really where we are in terms of CDF. And suffice to say that I've for now just mentioned a bit of it, and perhaps it would be important for the viewers out there to know that other than the bursaries within the CDF, we have the component which is dealing with community projects. We've got a component which is dealing with women, youth, and community empowerment. We've also factored in an aspect of administration. So when we're looking at it in terms
Mr.
of
Haamaundu.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Let me cut you short there. We'll get into the nitty-gritties as we progress with the show, because there's really much to be discussed, and obviously people that are watching would really love to get every information in a layman's approach, because we know for a fact that this has been a song, the issue to do with CDF. Since the act was enacted in 1995, this has been the song of, okay, we want to develop your constituency, this and that. So we'll be getting into that, but let's go at least step by step, and then so that our people may be able to understand. Okay, yeah, so that our people may be able to understand little by little the benefits of CDF, and obviously the guidelines that have been put across in accessing CDF this time around, especially looking at the fact that it has been increased to 25.7 million kwacha, which has never been seen in the country before. So maybe coming back to Chaza's question, let's talk about the objective of these CDF guidelines. Why should one follow the guidelines that have been put across by the government? What is the importance of me who wants to apply to follow these guidelines?
Well, I think the reason for guidelines is to offer guidance. because we must appreciate that the money that is being put forth or that will be utilized are public resources. So it is essentially meant to protect your interest and my interest. It is meant to protect public interest. It is meant to ensure that there is accountability and transparency in utilizing of public resources. That's why the guidelines were put forth. Because minus the guidelines, I think that we might end up having a situation which is chaotic. Because remember, I've been saying that this is public money. This is your money. This is money for all the 18.5 or 19 million Zambians. So it was important and necessary that clear guidelines are put in place so that the money is accounted for properly and it is utilized in a transparent manner as possible.
So, Mr. Haamaundu, this is a fund that we are talking about, and there are these guidelines that are supposed to be followed. First of all, I would like to understand this particular fund, how exactly it operates. Is it a grant? Is it a loan? Or really, how does it work as regards the beneficiaries, those candidates that would satisfy the conditionalities and they are granted, they are assisted this fund? How does it operate? Do they need to pay back? Or how does it really come into fruition? Okay,
like I had mentioned earlier, the CDF fund, the 25.7 million, is broken up into a number of components. From the 25.7 million, 5% of that amount will be set aside for administration. The balance is divided in the following ratios or proportions. 20% will be reserved for bursaries and skills development. A further 20% is available for women, youth, and community empowerment. 60% is available for community projects. So let me probably go per component other than the administration one. For the bursaries, you ask a question to say, is it a grant? Is it a loan? Does it need to be paid back? The only time that people will pay back is when they will be contributing positively to the development of the country in terms of being better skilled, being better educated, and therefore analytical, and will be contributing towards the developmental agenda of the country. So in short, the people who will be sponsored in terms of bursaries will not have to pay back. So that child who's going to Hillcrest, who's going to David Kaunda, who's going to Kenishas, who's going to Chiluvi, anyone who's in a boarding school and their boarding fee has been paid for, will not have to refund this money when they are done with school, as in paying back the 1,000 kwacha. The only payback that will be there is that there will be citizens who are able to contribute towards the development of the country. I mentioned of women, youth, and community empowerment funds. So in this next 20%, the resources have been divided as follows. 60% of that money will go towards loans. 40% will go towards grants. So I'll begin with the grants. Of the 40% grant money, we are saying this money must be used as seed money. It must be used to help members of a club, members of a cooperative, members of community groupings as seed money. So the grant will not have to be repaid. So when you are given a grant, the maximum amount of which is 40,000, it will not have to be repaid. And when you are looking at grants, you know, we have a concept which is called village banking. I'm sure that you're familiar about it. At times, a group of people would come together to put resources together and borrow from that resource so that they grow their businesses. So government has recognized to say we have the number of people who have got an entrepreneurial mind, but the limitation that they have is that they do not have financial resources. So government is now saying you can be given this amount of money for as long as you can demonstrate to say you'll be utilizing it amongst yourselves to grow your businesses. So that is that about the grant. And of course, as you go from area to area, there are others who want to utilize the grant, for instance, to buy a maize sheller, for instance. You go into Petauke where they grow a lot of maize. You go into Dunumwezi where they grow a lot of maize. They want a maize sheller so that the community can show their maize a bit quicker and be able to put it in sacks and sell and make money for themselves, as opposed to hiring labor because they do not have money. So it is such ideas that this grant will be utilized on. Then the other 60%, which is a loan, is money which will be available to be borrowed or to be lent out by the Constituency Development Committee. So, Lance, if you have a business idea and you want to borrow, you will be permitted to borrow up to a maximum of 200,000. The minimum is 5,000 kwacha and the maximum is 200,000 kwacha. The next question would be, would this money be interest-free? The answer is no. You have to pay interest, though the interest is not exorbitant. It's very, very minimal. So on every 100 kwacha that you borrow, you will be required to pay back 5 kwacha on top of the 100 kwacha. So that is what it translates to. 5% simple interest, not compound interest. 5% simple interest. So if you borrow 100 kwacha, you pay back 105 kwacha at the end of the year. And I'm sure that you agree with me to say this money is more or less free money because it is cheap. So the whole idea, again, is not to stifle people from from engaging in business activities because the cost of borrowing is high. So I think it's important to take note of that. Then I move on to the next component, which is community projects. In there, we're saying 60% of the 25.7 will be available for community projects. What are these community projects? These are projects which will be identified by the people through the Ward Development Committee, passing on this information to the Constituency Development Committee to say our needs in our area is we need to have a feeder road, or we are in a village where our children are weekly boarders, but we think that we must build a dormitory so that our children do no longer need to trek on a weekly basis, but we instead be confined in a boarding facility because there's a dormitory. So this money will be available for infrastructure development within the constituency. And in terms of eligibility, who is eligible to be given these assignments? Any business which is resident within a particular constituency. We have 156 constituency, and as a deliberate policy, we are saying the constituency development committees are encouraged to identify or to give out contracts to people who reside within the constituency. And how do they know that you reside within the constituency or who resides within the constituency. It is any person who's been domiciled or who has been staying in a particular constituency for at least 6 months. Remember at the beginning I said the idea of the CDF is not just to empower the constituency in terms of infrastructure, but it's also to empower or improve the socio-economic status of the residents of the constituency. That's why we're now saying deliberately we must ensure that the opportunities are given to people who reside within the constituency. So in essence, that is what CDF is. Those are the components that are available of the CDF, and that is how the funds will be dispersed.
All right. So maybe just still sticking on the same issue. In your response, PS, you talked about bursaries and students accessing other things, especially the agenda. Now, my question here is in line with this. We have students in these different constituencies that cannot access student loans because their schools don't have such avenues, and some are not in technical or vocational or either entrepreneurship programs. How do they benefit from CDF to fund their different education careers? Because we have people that are at Apex, they don't have. Yeah, we have people that are at Apex, and these people, they don't have student loans. It's not so. We have people that are, let's say, living on Awasa University. They are not student loans, but they still want to access CDF. How is it possible for them to access CDF?
Well, you ask a very pertinent question. How is it possible for them to access CDF? Perhaps you'd have even asked the rider to say, do they qualify to access CDF? I think as you're asking your question, you gave clear guidance in terms of who is eligible to access, this manual component of secondary school bursaries or skills development. So skills development is exactly that. It is money which is meant for skills development. So when you bring in people who are perhaps at UNILAS or who are at Apex University or Mulungushi University or indeed University of Zambia, you ought to ask yourself a question to say, before CDF, did we have people at Evelyn Horn accessing these funds? The answer is no. Did we have people at Lusaka Trades having access to money to finance, their skills development? The answer is no. So from a government perspective, there was realization to say, those of you who are very sharp, who got 6 points, 9 points, 10, 11, who proceeded to go into University of Zambia, into Mulungushi University or these other higher institutions of learning, have an opportunity through the bursaries committee or through the higher loans authority where you can get a loan to finance your school. But the question was, what of people who went out of school, could not progress beyond grade 9, but they are skilled? They could not progress beyond grade 7, but they want to use their hands to earn a skill and, contribute towards providing for their families. That is the background that we are coming from. So government says, let us take care of these people. But of course, like you rightly noted, I'm sitting at the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, and we are getting quite a lot of feedback from the public there, people are saying, what of us, we have not been catered for. yes, you might not have been catered for now, but you're probably catered for in a different situation. But again, we are looking at the resources that we have available, and for now we are saying this is the group of people who must be catered for so that they are uplifted, because they were totally ignored. But as we go forward, resources allowing, I'm of the view, I believe that it's actually government's intention to ensure that in terms of education, each and every citizen of this country must have access to education. They must not be encumbered, or they must not be hindered from progressing because of lack of money. But we are coming from a background where, as a nation, we were debt-ridden. We have so much liabilities that we need to deal with. So for now, government has said, this is the amount of money, and this is the guideline which we must operate in. That's why the guideline was made available, is to ensure that, we say these are the parameters, these are the limits that you must operate in, because when you leave it open-ended, you end up not doing anything. So in short, the people who are eligible have been defined. And even when we are looking at skills development, you need to be enrolled or have an acceptance letter from an institution that is accredited by TVETA, because we don't want to put money as a country into a school which is not accredited, whose curriculum or curricula we are not sure of. That's why we're saying you need to have accreditation from TVETA, so that once it goes through TVETA, we are sure to say that the curricula, or what they're imparting, or what they're teaching, the skill they're imparting onto our learners is a skill which has been approved by government. And government by nature is a bureaucratic institution. Have you ever asked yourself a question why government is bureaucratic? The reason government is bureaucratic is we want to go through all the processes, think through, so that when we make a decision, we will not have to relook. So that's why we are now saying you need to be accredited to TVETA for you to offer, or for you to access money from the Constituency Development Fund, because we don't want a situation where you say, I'm a plumber, I went to Lance and Chaza College, and the possible employer will be saying, niwandani wamina wa Lance na Chaza. So we are now saying, when you've gone through a TVETA registered institution, when you are given a certificate, when you come to the Ministry of Local Government to say, I've been trained and you've advertised for a job, when we look at the certificate, we'll say, okay, this is from a government accredited institution. So that's the first step. You will now be allowed to sit on an interview and be asked questions to assess whether you can actually practically do what you profess to be qualified to do. So we want to give people keys which will open many doors, not keys which will just open the door for Chaza and Lance because they know that I'm the one who trained this particular person. So that is the whole essence of this activity.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Haamaundu. For now, before we break for a commercial, I would like to find out from you, like you have explained, that students will be given these grants and will not be expected to pay back literally. My great concern is that in the previous regime, we saw students that were given bursaries that were not actually known that would be paid back But here is a double offer now that you started working. Higher Education Authority has actually entered their payslip to actually have them pay back what was provided for them as bursary. What is the guarantee this time around that these grants, these funds that will be given, especially in terms of funding education, what is really the reliance? Is there any provision of the law that is backing that they will not need to pay back?
Yes, they will not need to pay back. That is what the guideline is saying, and the guideline is anchored by the CDF Act, and this is a government pronouncement. The difference between this facility and the facility you alluded to earlier is that the students who had gotten loans, they went to the loans board, they were given a loan. They signed up to say, this is a loan, and I'll repay when I start working. So that is the difference. That is a loan which was signed up for, and there was an agreement to say they will repay when they start working, and the repayment periods are agreed. The amounts of money which are deducted are agreed upon. So that is where the difference is. Whereas this money is not a loan. It is money which is meant to help the vulnerable to go through their secondary school education or to get a skill. Remember, I indicated to say that there are those of us who are not very strong at school, who perhaps, were unable to distinguish between a triangle and a rectangle. But when you give me a piece of wood to say, can you make a stool or can you make a chair, you'll be amazed by what I'm going to do. So we're saying these two need to be given that opportunity, because many a times, when I do not have a certificate hanging on the wall to say I'm competent enough to do this, you will not pay attention to me. You will not open doors for me. So that's why we're saying they too must be given a key, because you who's a university graduate, you who's a graduate from Evelyn Horn, from NIPA, from these nice colleges, you have a key which can open almost any door. People will listen to you when you go, but these might not be listened to. So as the government is saying, they also need to be given an opportunity. So in terms of repaying, there will be no repayment at all in terms of bursaries, because these are bursaries. And even when you go back into history, the President of the Republic of Zambia has emphasized to say he went to school on a bursary from grade 1 to university. And it used to happen in Zambia, grade 1 to university, bursaries, you're on a government bursary, government is paying for you. And how are they paying back? It's by being entrepreneurs, it's by being business people, it's by working for government for particular periods of time to contribute towards the improvement of the economic social status of the country. I too went to school at least from grade 1 to grade 12. We were not paying. I know that the two of you are young. You pay examination fees at grade 7, you pay examination fees at grade 12, you pay exam fees as you go into college. But for me, who went to school a bit earlier, I can remember the first time I paid an examination fee was in grade 12, and it was a minimum amount, 13 kwacha. That is what we paid in 1990 as an examination fee. But before that, we're just writing exams. But now, grade 7, you pay exam fee. Grade 9, exam fee. So this in itself is telling you to say it is actually possible, and it is possible, because you will see the reality turning out. People have applied for boarding fees bursaries. They've been approved, and some of them, as we speak now, the schools have been paid. And I can even announce to say, as we go into June, July, we'll actually be publishing a database of the students and pupils who have benefited from bursaries, so that you, the public out there, can keep track to say, these names that have been published, will government go and claim money from them, so that if that does happen, in the unlikely event of that happening, you will come back to me to say, Mr. Haamaundu, on this particular day, you featured on Ubuntu, and you're telling us, sir, you told us, sir, to say, these people will not repay. How come they are repaying now? You'll be able to ask that question. And you probably even have the right to call me a liar. But I can guarantee you that you will not be given that chance to call me a liar, at least on the bursaries. Maybe on something else, you might find me wanting, but on this aspect, it is free. And
Okay,
free means exactly that.
Sorry, I'll cut you short.
Free.
Sorry, I will have to cut you short this time around because of time. We have to break for a commercial. We'll be right back. This is Ubuntu channel, and you are watching Meet Your Leader. Welcome. Himba Mioba is saying, do you think you've done enough sensitization for people in rural areas about the CDF? Sir? This one is...
You're probably muted me. Yourself.
Okay, yes, so we can get you now. We can get you now.
I'm sure you can hear me now. Then it's quite an interesting question to say, have we done sufficient sensitization, particularly in rural areas? And I can even broaden it to say, not just rural areas. Has there been sufficient sensitization in the country generally? The answer is probably bordering on no. I say so because at times when I'm listening to radio, reading comments that are coming from the public, you know, interacting with various groups of people, I get the feeling to say we have not done sufficient, because once you have done sufficient, you know, we'll be in a situation where if I asked you a question today to say, who was Liverpool playing yesterday? You probably give me an answer, isn't it? Charles, who was Liverpool playing yesterday? You know the answer. What position is Manchester United in the Premiership? You know the answer. Who blew a chance to be in the top 4? You know that is Arsenal. So that is the level which we hope that this CDF talk will go to, where it will be something which people can talk about, people can understand. When we are looking at you know, the distribution of resources, it should be as easy as it is when we are discussing football. You know, we should be as easy as we are saying Karim Benzema this season has been scoring in almost each and every game. That is the level that we need to reach at. So for now, I agree to say that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of sensitizing the public. And I must state that I'm most grateful to Ubuntu for according us an opportunity to reach out to more people through your platform. So as a ministry, I can actually state that we are committed to utilizing as many available opportunities as possible to reach out to the people. But we would also want to implore the people out there, those of you who've gotten to understand what the guidelines state, understand what CDF is all about, understand the objectives that are there in CDF, to reach out to as many people as possible. You must be ambassadors of development. You know, we have been reaching out ourselves to the church. We've been reaching out to traditional leaders. We've been reaching out to people of influence to ensure that the word spread so that as many people as possible get to know what CDF is all about. But evidently, we have not done enough as yet. When we have done enough, you will not even need to ask. The moment you're asking questions, we know that we have not done sufficient.
Thank you so much. Mr. Producer, kindly bring in, Percy there is saying, do the MPs know how to use these funds? Because some MPs have no clue. That's Percy Chama.
Yeah, quite an interesting question, and I've just been talking to say we've probably not done sufficient sensitization, and here is a person who has an opinion to say some members of parliament have got no clue, and of course I cannot engage him and argue, because clearly he has a basis on which he has formed that opinion. But suffice to say that the members of parliament have been given the guidelines, and some of the guidelines were actually birthed by the members of parliament. So even beyond the members of parliament, that's why I say we need to take it upon ourselves to understand, read and understand what is contained in the CDF. And those of us who can read and understand have a responsibility to channel this information so that people get a better understanding. Generally, I think many a times you'd find that when you are presented with a booklet, we get to be intimidated to say, this is, I can't read from page 1 to page 40. I don't have the time. So those of us who have gone through the guidelines, those of us who participated in developing the guidelines, I think the onus is on us to pass on as much information as possible. So communication must be by way of what we are doing now, because others do not have time to read, but they will listen. And once they listen, they'll understand, they'll assimilate, and they'll pass on the
Mr. Haamaundu. So sorry to cut you short.
Yes.
There's someone on standby who is trying to join us live.
Good evening, Charles. Good evening, Charles, and good evening. Yes.
Please go right ahead with your contribution or question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles. My question goes to the PS, and how safe is the CDF in these councils? Because there's some news that are coming out that these people in the councils have not been paid. So how safe is the CDF? Then the other question is, there are some stories like in the past, there are some councils that failed to use the 1.6 million. What assurance or what are you doing as a ministry to ensure that these monies that you're sending to the constituencies, they'll be utilized this time around? Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you, Mr. Haamaundu, Jeremy. You can take it up, please.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jeremy. How safe is the CDF, given that there is information coming out that some councils have not been paid? The money for CDF is sitting in a Constituency Development Fund account. And this account is controlled by members of the community through the Constituency Development Committee. So people from the council cannot get this money minus authority of the Constituency Development Committee. So it is ring-fenced. So it is protected. So they will not just go and sign out money to say we've not been paid on this end, so let's channel this resource elsewhere. Secondly, he mentioned to say there has been failure by some councils to utilize 1.6 million. And he's actually right. It is amazing how some people indeed fail to utilize a resource. But what we have now been doing is we have engaged in 2 capacity building programs or activities. Many people sometimes fail to utilize resources because there could have been some political impediment where one person was saying, because I don't like members of the Constituency Development Committee, we will not use this until we change. Others were simply just suffering from inertia, and there was no follow-up from the people who were charged with the responsibility of overseeing this implementation. But for now, we are saying, you have been given 25.7 million, you have been given money. How can you fail, you as the community, to spend money? Chaza, if I gave you money, or Jeremy, if I gave you money to say, here's 25.7 million to spend, are you going to fail to spend the money? The answer is no. If you fail to spend the money, we'll be questioning you to say, but why are you failing to spend the money? So unless there will be a reasonable explanation as to why people are failing to spend money, failure to spend money will not be accepted. We now have in the country a Budgeting and Planning Act, and it entails us to plan on how resources must be utilized. So it's a similar thing even when it comes to the councils. It's a similar thing when it comes to the Constituency Development Committees. They are expected to plan on how they intend to utilize the resources. So forward planning is being encouraged. And I'm hoping that as we get to 2023, we will not have cases where money has not been spent or is not committed to being spent, because we can have an activity where, for instance, they are putting up a structure and, we don't want you just to spend money just for the sake of spending it. You probably need to spend it in January because that is what your work schedule entails. So what will be important is planning, and ensuring that there's monitoring and evaluation. So these are some of the activities that we'll be embarking on, and I can tell you that we are receiving a lot of support from that perspective, and I'm hoping we will not come back and say, we did not spend money for no apparent reason. I'm hoping that you will not, catch me on that one to say your people have failed to spend money. I'm hoping that will not be the case.
Pesi, good evening. How are you doing today?
Good evening. Yes, Honorable. Can you see the familiarity of the face who is asking you a question? We'll talk later. Yeah, I know. Yeah, we'll talk later.
Yes.
The question is, okay, it's me who asked about who said the MPs. The reason I said that, I had to clarify because typing it's tiny. The reason I said that, it's the comments or statements I've heard from E.G., JJ, that is it Petauke MP or something like that? His comments is made on CDF. And Bowman Lusambo, the comments is made. To me, their comments, they are showing me that they don't know. That's the simplest way to put it. Yes, there are other MP, when they open their mouth, they talk about CDF. Oh yeah, he's talking sense. I can understand that. But these two, I don't really understand what they say. That's why I said it feels like, unless they are playing politics, then that's another game. But if playing politics, it makes them look like they don't know, then to me, that's why I'm saying some MPs don't have a clue. So I'll leave it there.
All right. Thank you so much, Pesi, for your contribution right there.
And it's been a great time. We've learned quite a lot, and saw a message coming from Chirufia Walia, who is saying the process is so tedious, and it appears that for you to access the fund, you need to belong to either UPND or PF or any other political party of stamina. I wish Mr. Haamaundu could take up that one. If there's need, we shall definitely come back right here on the same platform to bring him, probably after some time of dispensing this fund. Would like to know, where are we, how has it been dispensed, such and such, and we'll bring on such questions. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great time. This is Ubuntu Channel. My name is Chaza. We were together with Lance. We're saying goodbye. God bless you. See you next time.